It's just I was in the sun for 2 days.
How dare you? Hello to anyone watching the replay. Thank you so much. Yes, and now we'll wait for real people to come in. I feel like I had something else prepared for the replay people, and then it went.
Well, the replay people are the MVPs. If you're a replay person, you should go into the comments and you should leave a red emoji to let us know that you came here.
Say, I'm a replay person. Just kidding.
And if you're in the live chat, what emoji should we have people put in? Because this is something Erin does at her book club, and I really like it. Emoji for if you've read the book versus if you haven't.
Oh, what does she do? Does it change?
Yeah, she usually bases it off the book. So like when we did Parable of the Sower, it was like a tree.
If you've read it. If you've read
Red Famine, put a red apple.
Oh, that's good.
And if you read Gates of Europe, I don't think there's a gate emoji.
A plane? I don't know. I don't know what goes with.
How about just a Ukrainian flag? Is that simple? Like,
if you have an iPhone, I don't know how it works.
Oh, I guess on the computer you can just do Windows thing. I think they have all the flags.
Or you can just tell us.
Yeah, you can just tell us. And if you haven't read it and you're just here for the vibes.
The vibes are chaos because Jessica.
Yeah, but what's our chaos emoji?
Hold on. I don't know how to describe it, so I'm just going to type it.
Yeah, you can just put it in that.
Chaos emoji. This. Here. Here is chaos. Ooh, look at that. Snaps for Erin.
There we go. Yes, someone is here for all of it. That's good. That's good.
I am impressed. Both and chaos.
Hey, I somehow read both, and I wasn't even required because I told you I might not.
I know. I'm so proud of you. I will go ahead and tell those who are here that I have been very apprehensive about this live because I don't feel like I absorbed as much information as I normally do with nonfiction. So Angela is really our leader here today. She's our MVP. She came up with these questions. she is the doctor here. Me,
I have a doctor in history.
I have no letters behind my name, honey. Nothing. But wait.
I like Liz's. I think Liz's are meant to be chaotic too.
I appreciate it. It's giving chaos, and that's why we're here on a Saturday evening for me. I guess that'll be a good thing about being in the States is I won't have to. Usually these lives always coincide with my dinner time. I eat late, but so if you've read either one, but it doesn't matter if you haven't, because that's the great thing about nonfiction is people can discuss it and it doesn't really spoil you.
Yeah, we're not spoiling history.
There's like so much. There's so much in here. Don't worry.
I was about to say we are. I know I'm still a doctor. I think it's important because there are so many fake doctors who claim that they know medical things.
No take backsies. Hi, Pat. Oh my God, heat wave. Okay, I just was in Scotland. Is that y'all's heat wave? Because that weather was amazing. We were basking in the glory of 60 degrees.
It's like a normal summer in Boston right now, which means it's like 80 today, which is, I think, close to 27 Celsius for European folk or people or everyone but the United States who uses Celsius.
It's been only like 85-ish here. Well, since we got back, which is
pretty good for Sicily.
I mean, we got off the plane and we're like, ugh. I mean, the hottest day I think between London and Edinburgh was 74, and I mean, we were just living. But I'm just like, I haven't even looked at the temperatures of where we're going because I do not want to get depressed at how much I'm going to melt because I'm dying at 85. So I don't want to know what it is in the red state.
At least like the infrastructure you're going to has a lot of AC.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's good. And building a house with a new HVAC system.
So I mean, there's that because in Boston, what sucks is when it gets really hot, the infrastructure here struggles.
That's like Washington. When we lived in Washington, we did not have central AC. We didn't have AC at all. And luckily, I mean, typically it didn't get hot, but like haha, climate change. And the place we were living in last was it was built in like 2016 and we moved in like 2017. So I'm like, why haven't y'all started adding AC to these places?
Truly, when Boston gets to like 90 degrees, it can't anymore. The T breaks down, the buses don't work, all the work
Breaks
building.
down.
Yeah, like it'll still run, but like you're more likely to like have late trains or delays because a train like overheated.
Hello. Wow. We were like I said, it was cooler, so like lower 70s, maybe high 60s when we were in London, and we were just like both t-shirts and just like, woo. He had on shorts, I didn't, but so many people had on like coats. I'm like, this one man had like a button-up shirt, he had a sweater, he had a peacoat. I was like, I am sweating looking at you. And then in the tube, like so many of them were so hot, and I'm like dripping sweat because I got my mask on, dripping sweat. They were optional, but I had mine on in like public transportation, and I'm like, you have a coat on? I don't get it. I don't get it. But yeah, temperature differences. I'm like, I thought they would be used to this colder temperature. Why do you have a coat on?
Should we talk about the books?
What books? Okay, so I made a terrible decision because I'm not a decisive person, blame it on being a Pisces, and said, let's read both of these. Sorry about that. My bad. I will never do that again. And that is why there has not been a pick for July, although July is the 1-year anniversary of the book club. Woo! Yay! And also, just spoiler alert, I have a little prompt at the end, but I mean, you could say it now and I'll just star it and I can write it down later. For September, which will be the next pick, I told Angela, we need something short. One shorter book. So what though should we define it, like 350 and under?
Sure.
300 and under? I don't know.
I read fantasy books. I don't care the page.
I'm talking about, all the people for the nonfiction. So if you have like shorter nonfiction, that no more than 350 page recommendations, you can feel free to leave them here or in the Discord. That will be for September. Hopefully I'm somewhat settled.
Yeah, I've already picked the nonfiction that I'm forcing in the poll, so because I have powers. No, but like, have you ever been to like the equator? People at the equator wear like hoodies and sweatpants and like.
I'm from South Carolina. Now, I would wear shorts, flip-flops, and like a long sleeve shirt because it would be cold in like the AC inside, and like my arms got colder than my legs. But a hoodie? Oof, I'm glad I did not experience that. Soon. Okay, Leanna is going to finish Jade War, and then I told her I would read Jade Legacy with her.
She was saying in one of her videos you were rereading Jade War with her, and I'm like, oh no, Jess is not doing that.
No, I don't know. I might have misconveyed that. I cannot take that again. No.
I'm like, I know where Jess's head's been at, and that's not it.
That is too much. My mom will be like, why are you going out like that? You have on long sleeve shirt, shorts, and flip-flops. I'm like, it's hot outside, it's cold inside. But any whoozy doozy. So I did put up these little banner things because Angela gave great thingies. If anyone has any general thoughts, if you read either of the books, I preferred this one over this one because this is definitely like a history text, I feel like, which will be a great thing to refer back to because it's such a broad scope of time. But sometimes I felt like I was like, all right, I've been listening for an hour and we've gone through so much that I can't take anymore. And then this is obviously a more limited time frame, and more, I guess, kind of more narrative. Although I will say, and I think Mara said this in when she was talking about after she read it, that she didn't necessarily connect with the voice of the author, like her writing style. And I did feel kind of a disconnect sometimes where I was like, you're not grabbing me like I usually feel like I'm grabbed. But I mean, still great things that I'll be able to reference back to. But, I did struggle.
I think for me, it's hard to compare them because I think they answered different questions that I had. Mm-hmm. So like, I think when we were first talking about this, part of me was like, I know so little about nation building and how countries come to be throughout history in different parts of Europe. Like I know the map has been redrawn in Europe countless numbers of times.
Mhm.
You know, and I took AP Euro in high school, but like that doesn't focus on Eastern Europe or this like nebulous space that Ukraine kind of holds as this like border country. So I
Mhm.
think Gates of Europe was better at giving you the entire broad context of like how did we go from like, you know, basically Mesopotamian times to
Yeah.
now. And then I think Red Famine was really good because it grounded me more, I think, in the closer political times of connecting me to how did we get in the 20th century to now, which I think
Mhm.
helped me like localize it. So I feel like they did different things.
Yeah.
I did like reading Red Famine more. Like I read it faster and it was easier to read. I thought it was, I don't know, maybe it's just because I did it audio at work and I had no choice, but I really liked it. Like I don't think I had
Yeah.
the same complaints as you as Mara. I was, I think, just angry the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, I did listen to audio and so much because I mean, in the beginning, she does do like some history, but when she really gets into the specific years of the famine, I was just like mad.
Oh, with Famine, there were like 3.
I'm like, I didn't prefer Anne's writing. I did really enjoy Gates of Europe, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on which question you want to answer and
Yeah.
ask, right? Like, what context do you want?
There's so much there in the history that, like you said, they both answered different things and they covered so much. And I still feel like there's more because it's just so much history and such a complicated, long history. My grandparents were Ukrainian. This really helped them make sense to me. Gates of Europe really helped towards the end, especially when he focused on Galicia. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think, you know, what it kind of proves is like, I mean, we know so much about the nation building of the United States with our history knowledge. Like, you know, one of those 7 times that I learned about taxation and representation and tea in the harbor and one of those times we could have picked any other nation.
Like, Angela, no, we can only focus on the best nation.
The best in air quotes. Also, like recently, like speaking of like nation building, because that was just like a thing that's been like on my mind reading this and like ironically watching Thor: Love and Thunder and like a whole bunch of other things just about nation building.
Yeah.
But also I saw Ken Liu and he was talking about the United States is like the only country who's like this written document is our gospel. We must not stray from the written document. And like no other country treats a constitution
especially
like that.
A written document that was written so long ago when a lot of people weren't even considered people, but you know.
Even racist Thomas Jefferson was like, this should probably be rewritten once in a while.
Y'all should update this, just saying.
I'm just saying, like, he's not my favorite political person in history, but even he recognized maybe we shouldn't be the ones who like have the final say.
It seems like so many things that we say seem so simple, so logical, and yet here we are. Here we are. Okay, so obviously they were very different in their scope of time. And so did you have a preference or like what were a benefit or a drawback? Obviously for me, I thought a drawback to the big space was just me trying to remember it all. I feel like there were bits and pieces, and maybe because those bits and pieces, some there were already like terms, people, places I had already heard of. And so those were familiar and I kind of latched on to those. But then also obviously it covers a wider thing. And then, you know, Red Famine is kind of that one, those period of years of things happening that I had never heard of before, like ever. And I'm still shocked that only now learning this.
I think what I would have wanted more from Gates of Europe, because I don't think it's even the recognizing that it's a drier historical textbook type style. It's not meant to be a narrative. That's not its job. But I do think since I think it is attempting to get the lay person, like I think it's meant to go into the hands of someone who has the question, how did Ukraine get to be where it is today? What is the history of this land? I think sometimes it went too heavy into naming too many people without giving them enough background and stuff. Like, I think there needed to be times where context was given more strongly of like, I'm saying this person's name because of X reason. Like, I didn't care so much about the specific, like, I mean, there were hundreds of names we were given in Gates of Europe. It's like, I don't necessarily think we should remove the names, but I wanted context for why in this moment you as an author have decided this is one of many thousands of people in history we are bringing up right now. And sometimes he did, like with certain Cossacks and things like that. But I think that's where I felt the most overwhelmed in Gates of Europe. Whereas Red Famine, I think, did a slightly better job of not name dropping every single person under the sun.
Yeah, that was
a lot of
involved.
names.
Yeah, a lot. And then, you know, just even the names, and then because of, the area, the Slavic name, it just is a lot of
Well, and I think
overwhelming.
that's the beginning of Gates of Europe, I think, is better than the end in some ways because they have less names to pull from. You have
Mhm.
less history written down. So we had less people and we were focusing more on the broad picture of how we generally have different people coming in and out and the different conflicts and the different dividing lines and who came in to conquer. Like, I think that helped me and I was more interested in that.
Mhm.
That book also made me play a 4X Civilization game again because I am a sucker for those. That's all I can think about.
I mean, same, Aaron. Just because, and I know we'll talk about it, but just things I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, I was just so angry. Understanding why Russia behaving this way presently, but I think Gates of Europe made a better history. Yes, should is independent. I don't. Again, I was struggling with like comprehending this. I can't remember if this was covered in the books, but I remember after reading, I went to Google Maps and I was like, let me zoom out again to refresh myself on the
Yeah.
size of Russia, and I was like, excuse me, why do you need this?
Because
Why do
the
you
land
need?
is so good. Like, truly,
Yeah,
it's just
like
that land has resources. If the
it's
land
just
was
like
barren, they
the
would not care.
best. I'm just like, go away. Go make better land over here. I know that doesn't always work like that. I know, but I just get angry at the geographical size of
Well,
Russia and the
well,
way they're just like, no, come over here.
well,
Meh.
and like a slight tangent is like, so Venezuela is right next to the country Guyana, and there's like a multiple Guyanas in South America. For people who don't know, there's English-speaking Guyana, which is more of a Caribbean nation than a Latin American nation, and then there's French Guyana, and I think there's one other one. But the one that is the English-speaking Caribbean Guyana is right next to Venezuela, and depending on what year it is, the map changes for how big Venezuela is because Guyana has oil. And so every so often, the current president will just decide. I'm just
Oh, let's take a couple 100 kilometers over here. Oh, wow. I did not know that about the Guyanas. Wow.
yeah, well, they were. I mean, a lot of the coastline of South America, and, Caribbeans. You had the Dutch, and so they
Mhm.
all. But no, yeah. I mean, I think Guyana, the English-speaking one, is like the only country in Venezuela that's doesn't consider themselves Latin American. They definitely have more Caribbean roots when you talk to people there.
Look at that. We learned something.
I'm not speaking for all Guyanans, but that's what a lot of my friends have told me.
Yeah. Even the Roman. Yeah. I mean, that from Gates of Europe, when I got it, I was shocked to see just like how far and how many different empires and different groups of people just have been through, in, controlled, wanted, battled for that
Well, like,
area.
just like learning about how, like, so I think I learned a lot in AP European history. We went from Catholicism, and then what Luther did something, and then we have Puritans. Like, then we had a lot of branching off, right? Like, that's a thing we learn about. But we never really learn about Orthodox Christianity versus Catholicism, which is like a major break. So this book really got me curious to look
I
into
remember
that.
when you messaged.
I got so excited. I'm like, oh, I want to learn about this thing.
I mean, there's so many things. What bothers me about the limits of human just time in my brain is there's so many things I want to learn, and like I just know I can't. Yeah, but getting bogged down, there is so much covered
There's so
in.
much.
And I mean, I thought it was shorter, but I mean, the words are small, so there's still a lot in the book, but still for the length of the book and the amount of time covered, it is pretty short. And I think that lends to what you were saying, was like so many names thrown in here, and he didn't really give it enough time to like flesh all of those out, or he could have been like, maybe not name all of them. Like, I'm sure I guess he felt like they were all significant, but it can get confusing when you're like, but why? Why is
Well,
this and this person?
Or like, I think it comes from my like scientific writing background too, where I'm like, okay, you're speaking jargon. You truly are. You're speaking jargon. You're not noticing it. And if you're going to do that, if you're like, but this has to be here, if you're just like, I cannot not have this person's name be here, they are crucial, then you have to define it. And no people's names were defined, I think, often enough for the audience of the book.
Yeah. If it was a purely more academic text, that would make more sense. And I feel like this was just written for the lay person, right? Like I
I mean, it was definitely written for someone who was curious about how did Ukraine become a nation and why they should be a
It was
nation.
published by Basic Books, so it should have a basic understanding. Hello.
Yeah.
But yeah, so more of that. But I added a question because I don't know if anyone had thought, did anyone prefer the more history textbook style or over the more narrative? Because I of course like a more narrative. Usually, sometimes there have been instances where I'm like, I wish this could have been more like academic, but in this case, I feel like I got more out of the narrative style of Red Famine. Or are you just like they each did what they needed to do in their different way?
From a consumability perspective, it is more consumable to read a narrative nonfiction, and I like feeling like I'm making progress in a book. That is who I am as a reader. I like, marking off my currently reading as done, and it took me a month and a half to read Gates of Europe, maybe 2 months, can't remember. Yes. But I was also the 5-year-old who went to Costco and got the big dinosaur textbooks and took notes and read them page by page, and this reminded me of that time.
I know both you and Mara really like the history part. I didn't do it with dinosaurs. I was from a young age, and I mean I still am obsessed with Switzerland. So I am old, and we had encyclopedias back in the day. Yeah. And I used to look in any encyclopedia. I used to get every little book. They were short books about Swiss food, Swiss, all these things. That was my jam. Just I wanted to learn about Switzerland. So I understand that. I think I would say medical apartheid is less narrative. And I wouldn't say it's fully textbook, but it's less narrative. But I really enjoyed that one because there was just so much science and experiments and stuff that had to be explained. So it doesn't always not work for me. But liked the textbook style, but it could have just been due to Anne's writing. Yeah, there's something. I cannot put my finger on it. I have another book by Anne Applebaum. I have Gulag, I believe. So I want to see if in a different, reading space and not having to read that, if I have the same reaction to her writing with that one. I have a hard time cutting down world history in 100.
No, I mean, I think it's a challenge whenever you're an expert in a field, figuring out I only have X amount of time or space to convey all this information and cherry picking what gets to stay or go and still being an effective conveyor of information. It's super challenging.
Yeah. Overly sarcastic productions on Ukraine.
No, I loved watching. So I loved reading Gates of Europe, being excited about being curious about something, and then finding a YouTube channel that did a mini 10 or 20 minute thing. I had a lot of fun doing that.
That's what I love in general about nonfiction is learning about something and then going to find other resources, whether it's a podcast or a YouTube video or something else about it. I'm wait, I want to learn more.
Okay. Well, and I told you, it's even though I didn't finish Gates of Europe before starting Red Famine, I'd gotten past the part of the Cossacks. I think I got up to Catherine the Great in Gates of Europe before starting Red Famine. So I missed the Age of Enlightenment or whatever. But having read that much, I actually understood a lot of the conflicts that were happening in the Ukraine countryside and how they were using Cossacks and families like that to pit people against each other. I had some cultural context of how society has evolved and how Ukraine itself has just always been pushing against the norms of medieval and Eastern European feudalism. I think was really interesting. I'm not sure how many other countries were as active as that, but I think Ukraine's position of always switching hands gave it I feel like the whole idea of the Cossacks, I just thought were really interesting.
There was so obviously there's been so many. I know that with Sicily also, there's been so many different people that have ruled Sicily and so there's different cultures and stuff. I didn't realize just how much had gone, how many hands and different people with Ukraine. But I felt this too, Christina. Some parts I was okay, that last chapter was very interesting, especially the things that you're oh, is this Baron the Nightingale time? And then other ones it was yes, I'm sure this is important, sir, but you are not holding my attention.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you as the reader can provide the context to make something interesting. That section, I don't think would have been as interesting, the Baron the Nightingale one, if I hadn't read the Baron the Nightingale and be oh, is that this person's father? Because I know Baron the Nightingale has some historical roots and figuring out, oh, that's where the Tartars are, like getting a more geographical sense. Because when I read Bear and the Nightingale the first time, I'm just like, we are in this part of the map and very broad.
General cold place. That's where we are.
And then when the author doesn't provide that context for parts of history that you might not be as interested in or familiar with, and you don't have anything, like I think for me, the Catherine the Great section and like from there up to like the 20th century was like the roughest for me.
Mm-hmm. And your videos helped. Awesome. Thank you for sharing those. So, sorry. I don't know if it changed anything on your screen.
Nothing happened over here. Everything is A+ professional production values.
Wait, okay. So did either book challenge any previous thoughts that you had about Ukraine, whether that's historical or present? I wouldn't say I had like concrete ones. Obviously I've just always known of Ukraine and then, back and forth with Russia. I guess I just learned more. Like I said, I didn't realize how many different civilizations, empires, and how much back and forth that they've gone through, and the reasoning why Russia continuously, wants to pull them into their little web of giantness. But I don't know if anyone else.
I mean, I think I came from a place of vast ignorance. Like I just didn't know a lot. Like I knew what their flag looked like. I had a general idea of which winter sports they were good at the Olympics. Like, I mean, I really didn't have a lot. And I know whenever I watch West Wing, which is like one of my favorite political drama shows, there's always like a part in the season where Ukraine's like a big deal and like a potential new war could be started because of a Ukraine-Russia thing. But like that was all the context I had. And I think I was actually really surprised at how multicultural and how many borders exist in Ukraine. Religious borders, Western versus Eastern culture. Just also the fact that they don't really have one language, right? Like there's so many languages. We have different, like we have the agricultural sections, we have the industrial section, like just truly, I didn't like realize... we all say in America melting pot, but I felt like Ukraine was like a melting pot.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either, the differences. And I've always been, I guess we're just ignorant and like assumed that Ukrainian and Russian were the same, like language. I just was like, oh yeah, all Ukrainians speak Russian. And obviously that is not the case, but there are Ukrainians who speak Russian and also speak Ukrainian. And, there's people who have family people who are Ukrainian who live in Russia who have family, and because obviously from the going back and forth, there's going to be people on different sides. But like you were saying with the West and the East, just like differences on how, like there's
like the government differences, the economic differences, like there's just so much. And like the fact that like there's always been a Ukrainian language and different versions of it, because I mean, that's just what happens when you have a lot of space. But the fact that since I think even before Catherine the Great, there have been on and off 50 to 100 year time periods where the language was suppressed. It was not allowed to be taught in schools. Like their fight to have their own cultural art identity was also very intriguing to me. Like their love of poetry. I don't know. I don't think I expected that to be like, I mean, I didn't have an idea of what is Ukrainian art, but I now know they are very into poetry.
It, in some ways, and not to like downplay their story, but learning about other things or indigenous people of different places in America, some of that rang true again with like, I was just thinking of the parallels between like indigenous people in North America and how they were, wanted to suppress their language and their religion, and stuff like that from, people coming in and wanting to change everything. And that just was something that I was like thinking of, and I thought was interesting, and just all the different geographical places, different cultures, religions of people, but the same things that they continue to go through when there's this oppressor or this colonizer that comes in and wants to change how people are, no matter where, that they experience these same things over and over. 1922, oh goodness, was forced to leave during World War II and never lived in a free Ukraine. Oh,
stubbornly Ukrainian to the end.
Because what I heard, Bree from Locked Booktician mentioned Red Famine, but I also was listening to, going back to me and Mara and our Mormon deep dive, Mormon Stories podcast, and one of the guests was from Ukraine, and her parents had moved to the United States, and that's where she encountered Mormons. But she went back to live in Ukraine, and she was talking about a little bit of that too in her experience of, growing up in the Soviet Union, or the Ukraine, not the Ukraine. I don't know where that comes from. Ukraine under the Soviet Union, and then going back when it was independent. It's just, and then also I found, like, when you were saying the sports they were good at, I was like, wait, I know a Ukrainian is Oksana Bayul, because I'm pretty sure there was a Lifetime movie about her. She's an ice skater, and I had to look it up to confirm. But yes, Oksana Bayul from Ukraine, figure skater. She's amazing.
Well, that was another thing. So, I mean, I'm very into figure skating. That's like the only thing I watched this Winter Olympics. And like, because the Russian team is so competitive for female figure skating specifically, there's so many people who can like just choose to like use their Georgia citizenship or travel visa or something like that, or like all these other countries that, used to be partners. Like, so that was like probably my first intro into like post-Soviet ice skating.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like weird because like just the women's figure skating is just, I mean, it's pretty controversial, but they're also very good.
So. I love figure skating, and both figure skating and gymnastics I love, and both they stress me out so much because they go and I'm like, oh, okay.
I could never do like, what they do, and like, oh,
I'm like,
but like those are my favorite things to watch. Like those are the only reasons that I still try to figure out how to watch the Olympics every time they're on.
Truly. Does anyone have any particular interesting moments that stuck out with you from each book?
I've already talked about a few, but I'm sure I have more. And I actually had one and I forgot it because we've done an ice skating tangent. It's fine.
Red Famine, I thought it was interesting, and I need to find it again. It was towards the end where she's talking about that when this happened, there wasn't the definition, or there wasn't a word for genocide, or there really wasn't a word for what this was. And then coming after that, getting the definition of genocide, and then even just explaining like the origins of the word, I thought was really interesting. But for, I just always thought of genocide as, a specific campaign to eliminate a group of people. And then she also added in referring to someone else's book about different kinds of genocide, which I thought was interesting. I didn't really know, because she included political, social, cultural, economic, biological, and physical. I was like, wow, I didn't realize that. And I still think, because I think they mentioned in here the genocide against the Armenians, which I had heard of, but I still am shocked that so many random things. Obviously, I don't know a lot about the genocide in Armenia. I just know of it, but I still had not known of this. But I watched like an interview with Anne Applebaum, and she was talking about, just the misinformation, the denial that, Stalin really, succeeded with, so people wouldn't know about this, and like something how he like messed with like the census, so like all of these people who died wouldn't be noticed in the numbers. And so that the section on genocide, which is if you have the paperback, it starts on like page 416, or no, excuse me, let me go back, I think it's 414 it starts. But yeah, because it's like she talks about Stalin didn't seek to kill all Ukrainians, and not all Ukrainians resisted. And then, referring back to neighbors turning on each other, which that part, like, I know that happens, but anytime, that just broke my heart.
Oh, the sections on how people survived specifically were really hard.
Mm-hmm.
That was really hard. Something that I thought was, I don't know how to explain it, so I'm just gonna like maybe postpone that thought till something else makes my thought. I have the thoughts while you're talking. Like, we need to let Jess finish talking. It's rude to interrupt Jess.
No, that happens to me too, where you're like, no, but it's here right now.
It's in my head, and it's just like it's running away.
It literally happens to me all the time. But
no, the genocide stuff was really interesting, and like how hard Russia or the Soviet Union pushed to make sure the definition would include the Holocaust, but not include what they did.
Yeah. Yes.
No, yeah, it's in the description, and like the clinical way she describes what a famine does to the human body was just.
I could see it, and
you had pictures in your book.
Yeah, I didn't look at all of. After the first ones I showed you, I think the first time I was like, I'm scared to look. Yeah. I don't think it got that graphic there's like pictures of like mass graves and stuff, but there's not like, I in my mind, I think I also envisioned, because we've seen so many images of victims of the Holocaust. I think a lot of that just popped in, but there's not like a lot of pictures like that in the book, thankfully.
I've remembered both my thoughts.
Yes, go.
Okay, so whenever we were hearing about Stalin, who like you learn a lot about in American history class, so it's not like any of that was super surprising to me. But I think now having read Mediocre, I was just like, this average dude just causing so much trouble.
Yes.
Like, oh my goodness. Like he was like, what, a robber? Like
literally always, they're always so basic.
like it's just literally, and he was just like, cannot be wrong.
Not him.
I was just, and then also I was being reminded of braiding sweetgrass, and kind of like a different side of the coin of what you were talking about with indigenous culture, and how when we brought a lot of European culture to America, we brought the idea of land ownership and the idea of, what is it, meritocracy and everything like that. Whereas the idea of community and coming together and joint ownership of the land and appreciating the land is very much an indigenous thing. And I thought it was really interesting seeing the roots of a lot of European feudalism. Because like I feel like whenever I learned about that in school, it was always an abstract thought of like, yeah, there are serfs and there are like it was more like, yeah, it's a fantasy novel, right? Like I don't know. It was interesting actually, like seeing how the economy evolved and how Ukraine itself as a people would come together at different points to try to fight for workers' rights and kind of unions and things like that. And contrasting that with things we learned for communities. Because what we learned about here is like Ukrainian people, there's been such a mishmash of people who've come in and out. So the people who belong there and the definition of Ukrainian has truly evolved. And they've had to fight so much imperialism and empires. So like they have similar struggles to other people who've had their lands taken from them and taken advantage of.
For sure. I had another moment where when she starts talking about like the beginning of the famine, when I heard about this book, and I assumed that it was something environmental, like there was a drought or, something happened.
Especially since it lines up with our Great Depression kind of.
And it's like, oh, okay, well, they must have had something like that going on. And it's literally just them taking food from people. I was like, oh, you have got to be kidding me. I couldn't have. That was one of the moments where I'm like, I didn't hear that right. Let me go back. Let me go back.
Like they were, I think we were having some issues, but not to the point where you would lose. What was it? 7 million people or some astronomical number? Not
where all of these people are going to be starving. Like going and having people's like neighbors turn them in, and people just trying to keep like smallest amount to have.
And the class warfare, the way it's like, well, you're both poor, but he's the better poor that you need to fight, like, because he's working too hard. Like people who did what they had supposed to do, and then being punished. I'm just like, you can't win. Like
that part. And then when I was watching the talk with her, and she reiterated, I thought was really interesting how in all of these situations, there's always a way this person, this leader, whoever, finds a way to turn people against each other. And, it's just like, it made me think of the United States with like poor white people against black people. Like, oh, no, y'all may be both poor, but you're better because you're white. And like the power that they have, I don't understand what it is to make somebody distrust the other person. And then obviously there's, in some cases, like, oh, if you turn this person in, you get this thing or whatever. You get something for you, your family. But I was just like,
well, it also like, this was another thing where like I was relating it to things that were more familiar, because that's how I keep things interesting to me. How we have that similar class warfare in the United States, but we just use racial lines and things like that. Like all poor people are not helped by the system, but we keep them distracted with, racial divides.
Keep them busy and like angry, bickering and fighting with each other. So you can just see that. That's what I don't get about a lot of things, taking this back to America, where I'm like, but these things would help you too. It's not just like we want these social services or social programs passed for only black people, for, brown people. This would help everybody.
My friend and I were discussing how great, like the one good thing about college institutions is the healthcare. Because if you have their health insurance or whatever, you go to student health services, it's free. There's no copay. It doesn't matter. And so you can go for mild things and not worry about breaking the bank. Like you can go to the doctor when you feel sick and not worry, is this like necessary or anything like that. If anyone gets the opportunity to have that and then has to leave that type of system, like no one would be like, oh, it's so much better to not have this as an option.
Yeah. Why should we have access to healthcare? Yeah, we're included as part of the workers. That's in my mind, those two things are equated. Like, but no. Yes, how there are white people who don't want to have universal healthcare because they don't want immigrants to have access to it. As if that takes something from you. Like, if you don't need it, fine. But there are going to be other people who look like you who don't.
Everyone could use some preventative healthcare. It's really not that big a deal.
And they wonder why people end up in the ER with extreme health issues. It's because you can't go to regular doctor's appointments, or if you have a small something, you're not worried that, oh, I'm not going to meet my copay, or I don't even have insurance, so I can't go to the doctor. It's just, not to stay on America too long, but something, and I was having this argument with someone and about like, welfare. Whether that's assisted paying for like living or for food. And they're like, well, we shouldn't be rewarding lazy people, like, the parents or whatever. But I'm like, we were talking to people who had children. They're like, that's a responsibility to take care of the children. So I'm like, so you would rather the child not have a home, not have food? Like, at the end of the day, what you feel about the parent, even if we don't agree, why should that child suffer? They didn't ask to be here. They deserve a home, a safe home, food. But people are like, no, but I'm like, but you're not getting what I'm saying. That also affects them. There was a picture in here with a little child who was like really thin, and I was like,
well, and just like, I think this also, like, Stalin is just such an incompetent, egotistical maniac. And you haven't read Ship of Magic yet, but there's a character in there who is not as bad as Stalin, technically.
I just love this comparison.
But he's like one of those incompetent men that you're just like, you're not even accomplishing your goals appropriately, and you're choosing to do all of these horrid things. Oh.
Little baby. Yeah. Little peasant.
But like, I think that's the thing. It's like, okay, so you want to increase the productivity of the, USSR's economy. That's your goal. Well, your workers are dying, like literally dying. What is this?
Oh, well, get it together. Medical school and can't afford healthcare. Excuse me?
No, that's true. Yeah.
I am surprised and not surprised at the same time.
I was about to say, one of these days we'll do a nonfiction on medical stuff, and people will get to be real angry about other things.
The world. I'm like, the more I read nonfiction, the angrier I get. But then I'm like, but I want to learn more.
It was funny. I was at a wedding this spring, and I was just chatting with a friend, and he's like, "You're so much more radical than you used to be. What happened?" I'm like, "I've just been reading, and the more I read, the more I'm like." Yes. What is so wrong with just having another constitutional convention and burning the old draft, writing a new one? Like, I actually don't know what's wrong with that, other than we know it won't pass because power.
Yeah.
But
I mean, everyone can still have a quill. You can just have a little pen at the end.
Well,
it can be a reenactment if you want, if that's important.
Well, and that's what was... So the part of Gates of Europe I actually really liked at the end were like the last 2 to 3 chapters where you really get to see how Ukraine goes from leaving the USSR to attempting to have a nation. And you kind of get that earlier too, like I think after World War I, where they attempt to have their own nation, and like the pitfalls they come in and out of, and how they try to deal with corruption and the system. And I just thought that was really interesting how they are still attempting to make a more just government while still having to deal with the normal problems of government where there is corruption and power.
Yep. Yes. Also, yeah. How does that make any sense?
No, like truly, like, and also you need food, and you're not getting enough. Like literally,
you need food to survive, and you need more to be able to fight, to do things.
He's the worst project manager. He is that project manager at work who wants X but won't let you do what you need to do to get to X.
Immediately, like. Please. Oh my God.
But what was also So this was also, so, you know, I've read this book for so long, I kept interacting with the world around me while thinking about this book. And when we were in New Orleans, we went to the World War II Museum. And part of it, there's like Eisenhower quotes. And he's like, World War II was like the one time we were all fighting against tyrannical governments or something very like, everything's black and white. We were fighting evil. I'm like, you were on the same side as Stalin, who, when this started, had killed more people than Hitler. So I think we need to reassess. And also, Stalin and Hitler were on the same side until Hitler's like, but I want Ukraine because, again, agriculture.
Me. Mine. Heather, is Bree coming? That would be really cool.
I want to hear Bree's thought.
Because I did
StreamYard.
I did send her. I sent it yesterday, and I was like, you know, if you have the mental capacity, the time, we would love to have you join because Bree lived in Ukraine. Yeah. Gosh, such a worldly woman. But I'm just trying to look at the years again. So, okay, it was at least 5 million, at least, right? These numbers are not completely accurate. At least 5 million people died between 31 and 1933. So he launched his plan in 1929. So
you sent Bree the wrong link.
Did I?
Fix it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Invite, copy clipboard, BRB. Just kidding, I'm right here. Wait, what did Heather say?
I mean, no, truly, like, I read that quote after having been reminded, like, I already knew Stalin was, like, not great. Like, that's, like I said, one of the few things we'd actually talk about a lot because we had to be pro-Cold War. And in order to do that, you have to set up the villain. Because we teach history like it is a fantasy novel, which I think doesn't work. Like, I don't think that's how we should do it. But anyways. Because I just think everything's always so much more complex than that. And also, then what they do is they use the USSR as a reason for why communism is bad. And you read Red Famine, I'm like, at what point were we in communism? At what point were we practicing that? We were always like, well, we have to do this so we are competitive in the capitalistic global economy. Like I don't understand.
Okay, I sent it on both WhatsApp and Instagram, Bree. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, hold on. I see doctors spending half their time trying to fill out hundreds of forms to get their patients health care. Yeah. No. Yeah. How bad is that now we
provide, I mean, not, to, be really depressing, but we provide, it's Bree. I'm not even going to finish talking. It doesn't even matter.
Ooh, sorry.
She's here.
It doesn't even matter.
What is this damn double?
She's here.
Oh no, you're. It doesn't even matter. Shit. Mute the.
Okay,
one
it's
of
done.
them.
It's done. Focus. Ready.
Hello, hi. How are you? With your long locks. I seen it.
Everyone's having good hair days. We all love it.
Yeah, I mean, and I just realized, Angela, that there's like 10 locks over here. I must have said, fuck it. And I didn't retwist them. So at some point, I'm going to have to get out my crochet needle and really get up in there. I was like, how did you miss 10 locks? You know what I think it was? Criminal Minds.
It'd be like that.
Criminal Minds distracted me. Anyway, not to get back from the story. I mean, not the story.
No. We're just, yelling about Stalin being a basic.
Yeah, he's really easy to yell at. I will say he is like a unifying force, but I also think it's a distracting force because there are like so many other people who have taken advantage of Ukraine and their resources. He's just like the easiest villain to yell at.
Yeah. I have a story about Stalin, if y'all don't mind me sharing.
Let it out. So one of the reasons why I speak Ukrainian is because I got into a lot of arguments and I had to make sure that I was saying what I was saying and I was getting my point across in the arguments. Oh my God, trash, Christine. Sorry. Agree. So anyway, my landlord was just a huge Stalin supporter. His reasonings of supporting Stalin is because when Stalin was in power, there were jobs, people had specialized jobs, had places that they needed to be. No one was hungry, according to him. There was no struggle. Poverty wasn't there, which makes him
made him very upset of the state of Ukraine at that time, which was 2019. And one day he was telling me, as always, a lot of times when it comes to like the older Ukrainians, boundaries is just what's boundaries, you know? Like I like to sleep in the nude. There was times I would wake up and this man would be over me and like Brianuchka, що трапилося? Like he's just like Brianuchka, як справи? Давайте. I'm like, naked titties out, like great. I mean, wonderful. Glad to have you here. What, huh? You know what I mean? Like and it wasn't like he was like trying to be creepy. He was just like nudity, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, hi, I just came over, didn't tell you, didn't call you, snuck in here, really got the key and just hanging out. So how are you? Right. So one of our many arguments, he's just like, he's just like, forget the word he used, but essentially it translates to like, great job, Trump. Like Trump is doing good things. Like he's so great. And I was just like, sure, like, which means what? I was like, how is this great? Like, let's talk this out. He's like, Trump, he's for jobs. He wants jobs. He wants people to have jobs and have food and want to keep, Americans, America. Like like a purist in his thoughts. And I was just like, so if you like Stalin, I assume you also like Lenin? And he's like, yeah, loved him. And I was like, holy shit. So like having conversations with him and like other men of his age thought the same thing. Ooh. Like there were two men that I had conversations with in like smaller villages that was like, them two were tripping. You know what I mean? Like they were on some shit. But for the most part, the men that I interacted with just felt like, things were more secured in the time that Stalin and Lenin was doing their trifling shit, essentially.
Well, the people who were left are the people who weren't killed by the famine that was misregulated, right? Like these were the people that the government didn't let down, presumably.
Mm-hmm. A fake famine by that.
Well, yeah, the fake famine, obviously, after the first real famine. Like that's the thing. When you read Red Famine, there's so many famines. Which famine?
Yeah, but
everyone was well fed.
Okay. Yeah, and most people talk about Holodomor, which means the famine that we're referring to, which I thought was interesting when you think about language, because if you're like to say that I'm hungry, that is also the word that you use. So it's just, I don't know, it's just very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think language in Ukraine is really interesting, just based off what little I've gained from like these two books of just how they had to fight so hard for their language, and now it's not even uniform per se. But I think was it Red Famine that actually talked about how the people came together to make a uniform like dictionary and like things like that. I thought that was really interesting because that's so modern, right? Like that's the 20th century.
Yeah, shout out to Shevchenko. Shout out to him. Shout out to Shevchenko. Doing the Lord's work. But yeah.
Amen. Amen. Earlier I asked if anyone had any like preconceived notions or thoughts about Ukraine before reading these books, but since you lived there, was there anything like thoughts you had before moving there that you learned? I know you learned a lot of things living there, but anything specific?
One of them humbled me real fast was usually when I do new things, I go into it ignorant. And for the most part, that has done me well and removes me from a lot of like stereotypes and biases that I would have for different groups of people. However, I think it really hindered me and was just a dumb decision. To break it down to like very simple terms, was a dumb decision on my end. So when I would go there, I would be like, oh yeah, here in the Ukraine. And Ukrainians would be like, sure. Yeah, the Ukraine. And they're like, no, disrespectful to say the Ukraine, because it implies that they are a part of the Soviet Union. So, and they are a sovereign nation, sovereignty, individual folks. Amen. So that really shocked me because my American brain was like, I wouldn't even thought of that, like the United States. Like it makes sense to the English that we speak, but according to them, that's that's just not it. Another thing with language is that, like, in America, when we converse with each other, we finish sentences to the end and period. Rather it's a shortened version of it or not, you got the thought from the other person. In Ukraine, it's literally you just I don't really know how to describe it. Like, for example, davайте. Davайте means give me, or it can mean 100 other different things. Like, or it can mean people cut it in half and say davai. So davai can be like let's go, or sure you can, or not right there. Like, it can mean so many things. So you have to be like, okay, let me get into the brain of a Ukrainian and kind of sort of figure out what that means. Another thing that preconception I had is that every Ukrainian speaks Ukrainian. That is a straight up lie. People in the East speak primarily Russian. And even though Ukrainian is doing like Ukrainian-ification is trying to happen after what the Soviet Union did, the Russification that really messed up a lot of systems in Ukraine. The push to teach Ukraine and everything was beautiful, but there was also like some hindrance. Like, there were some laws that was passed, like teachers can only speak Ukrainian in classrooms. And I'm like, there's teachers in the East who don't know how to speak Ukrainian. There's teachers in the South that don't know how to speak Ukrainians. There's teachers in the West, like in the Zakarpattia region, they speak a language that 90% of Ukrainians are confused. They're like, wait a minute, what y'all talking about? So, like, and they live in the mountains, and they're just like, huh? Like, what are you saying? And they speak so fast, and it's such like, I feel like it's like closer to the tip of your lips. The way that they speak, so it can be really hard to understand them. So in my mind, I thought like, everyone in Ukraine speaks Ukrainian, when that's not true. Like, when I particularly worked with a lot of children, and I would talk to children, and I would be talking in Ukrainian, and I'm like, wait a minute, I think what I just said was pretty correct. And then I was like, rozumíte, which means like, do you understand? But rozumíte is also, it can be понимаете, which is Russian. So like, I would say that, and they would be nah. Like,
you're like, I'm pretty sure I just said, and they're like,
I'm pretty sure I killed that, and you did it. And then another one was like, I assumed that Russian and Ukrainian was the same. That is a fucked up thought in so many levels. But let's just stick with just like the language. Ukrainian has more in common with Polish than it will ever have with Russian. So Russians, when they're trying to like speak Ukrainian, it's it ain't gonna work. But Ukrainians can understand Russian speakers, which is so odd because not recently, but last year I was in Aruba and I stumbled upon a couple Russians, and I was just like, hey, and I introduced myself in Russian and was like, what y'all doing here, and spoke to them. And then they were like, oh, like, we noticed like your accent, it kind of sounds like Ukrainian. And I was like, yeah, because I lived there for a while. And they were like, oh yeah, I know Ukrainian. And I was like, давайте, which also, again, like, context, bringing it back. So I was like, давай, and then they were like, sure, sure. Like, they like,
you're like, no, honey.
They can say it to me. So it's like, it's just
That's
one of those.
fascinating.
There's just so many assumptions that I made about like, exactly. Like, when I also went to Indonesia, there were some Polish people speaking, and I was like, Polska mówi, and it was like, talk. Like, yeah, and we're speaking.
Language is so fascinating.
It's just one of those things. So those are all.
That like reminds me how like I can get by with Spanish, but as soon as you put me in like Portuguese, I can read it, but I can't listen to it. I'm like, this is not. We're using a very similar foundation, but our pronunciation is all over the place.
I get that trauma, Nazi trauma didn't allow. Yes.
Yeah.
Before you came on, I told Angela I used to think that Ukrainian and Russian were language it was just Russian. Like I was like, people from Ukrainian speak Russian and Russian speak Russian. And then reading this, or I had learned that before, but it just like, ooh, embarrassing.
No,
but
straight up. Straight up.
Well, and like
Yeah.
I think it was Red Famine actually talked about what Bree said about how it uses a spelling system that's similar to Russian, but it's more Polish based. And like that was another thing we talked about, things that like were surprising. When you learn about Poland in the United States, you only learn about it in the context of World War II, and they're like the people getting beat up. Poland was taking over stuff left and right in the early parts of Gates of Europe, and I'm like, what is this king doing?
You can't be talking about other people doing well. Yeah, I always also had heard it this way too. And then I remember hearing you, Bree, once be like, no, it's Ukraine. And I was like, dang. My bad.
Yeah.
Desi?
Yeah,
So,
you just don't know. Christine, I'm wondering what region, like what oblast is your family from? Because typically that's like Lviv, and Rivneska. So,
what part were you in? Where were you?
Rivneska, which is Rivne Oblast. It's, I was just saying it the way, but yeah, it's just Rivne. Yeah, because in Rivne, most people speak. So another thing with language, in Ukraine, there's a thing called Sorjik. And Sorjik is like, how do I describe it? Anybody in the chat help me describe Sorjik? Sorjik is like a dialect mixed with other languages. So it's like, so there are, I think it's over 27 oblasts in Ukraine. So think of them like states. And where I lived very close to the border of Poland. The first place I lived. No, the second place, sorry. The second place I lived was very close to the border of Poland. And their Sorjik had Polish in it. So like if you were from like Zakarpattia region, you're not going to understand the Sorjik there.
Yeah.
And it's going to sound like Ukrainian, but it's actually not.
Language is so fascinating.
And then like the reason why I hear Russian and I can understand and I can, speak, I don't really call myself fluent in anything but English, but I could definitely get around. But it's because when I first got to Ukraine, I lived in Chernihiv, sadly is one of the first places that they hit during the war. And I still don't know what's going on with the people that cared for me, and I cared for them there. But there in the village that I lived, Russian was spoken, mixed with Ukrainian because it was very close to the border. And one of the things that my host mom told me is that she showed me pictures of the volunteers she had before, and they were all Black. And she told me that she was like, this country does bad things to Black people, essentially. It was just like telling me about her experience with her countrymen and Black people. And then she was just like asking me to be more open-minded. And she was like, I care about your survival here. So we're speaking Russian in the house. She was like, we're speaking Russian in the house. So, and she would buy me like cookies that had the letters on the cookies. It would be like, sound that out, sound that out. Sound that out.
I love that.
She was very serious, or she'll get mad at me if I took a shower more than 5 minutes. She's like, Brianochka, sure, ekonam, choo choo. Like, you need to do a little bit and be
shorten down
the ecosystem. Or if I would go buy something from somewhere, she would be like, where do you get that from? And I was like, oh, this lady down the street. She's like, Gihimo, Tam Gihimo. Like, there's GMOs over there. I'm like, it's not. Literally,
it's fine.
Leave your garden across. Don't even worry about it. But like she was just like, she was just so kind, and like she was just like, yeah, my past volunteers were Black, and this is what happened. Oh, Ivano-Frankiv, that is a beautiful place. Such a beautiful. It makes sense. It makes sense. I went there and did a lot of trainings, and camps with like 8, 9. And then it was a group, 12, 13-year-olds in Ivano-Frankivs. Yeah, I like that.
Look at our worldly Bree.
Truly.
It's not worldly. It's just
Me and Angela just plain Jane's over here, like, yes, we wrote this book. And look at
I was
you.
about to say, like, I've traveled, but I've not immersed or lived in a place. Like, I've not had to humble myself the way that you've described, you know? Like, I've been a tourist.
Yeah.
what you definitely get humble when you're like, I'm gonna go live in this place. But
Yeah.
I'm sure you understand that, Jess. Like being like, I'm humble myself here.
Yes. Because I lived in Spain before, and it's funny because I'm in college and like, oh yeah, I'm taking all these classes. I'm in the 400 level Spanish, and then you go there and you're like,
yeah.
I remember the first day we all got there, we just forgot basic. We were just like, hola, yes, that's it, hola, hi.
And I remember when I went to Spain, we didn't have, well, you have to get a different SIM card, right, when you go to different countries, but we didn't even have smartphones, so we were reading menus, and it was, who remembers what this word is from the class? Like, what is this protein?
Listen,
the struggles.
menus are rough. I'm constantly like, so one of my favorite words in Ukrainian is opisate, which means to describe. So I would be in restaurants, I'm like, будь ласка, можна опишіть мені? Я не розумію. Like, describe it, because I don't understand. What is that? A tomato mixed with what? Like, is it red? Is it green? Yellow?
I need help.
We had a friend on the trip who couldn't have certain types of sugars, so I had to make sure there weren't like tomatoes in things.
Oh, that gets so more. Oh, I couldn't.
Yeah,
I think this. I don't feel like I have a good answer for this, so I'm glad you're here, Bree. Like, what?
I think it's a complicated question. I think Ukraine's an interesting answer to that question in some ways, like how multicultural and diverse it is, and its history. I don't know.
I mean,
okay, I will say this. Living in the region that I lived in, Ukraine, made me a nationalist. I will say it. Like, it was, I would be so into it. Like, I'll be on a train and like this grandma would save me from this trash man trying to touch me. And then she would be shocked, like, Divchatka. She would be like, Chorna skira, which means like darker skin. And she would be like, Rusiski, like she don't understand why I'm speaking Ukrainian. I should be speaking Russian. And then I would look at her and I would like say in Ukrainian, like, I live in Ukraine, therefore I speak Ukrainian. And she's like, and then everyone's drinking, having a great time. You know what I mean? So like that literally saved me. So when I think of this question, I just think of like ties to place, to culture, to language. Sovereignty. Like these people have been through hell and back and hell and back and currently in hell again. They are very resilient. Even in the messed up things that happened to me when I lived there, I will never forget the kindness that people were to me. Like it was, I can't even articulate it. Like I get sad when I think about the things that happened to me, but I also get equally excited about like the people who protected me. Like I remember there was one time where something happened and I have a friend, his name is Dima, love Dima, which is kind of funny because Ukrainians have like these stereotypes with certain names. They're like, these Dimas, they are bad as hell. Like these Dimas are fucking shit up. And like, but this Dima, I will die on the hill for Dima. Did you hear me? So I called him. I'm like, Dima, this man is chasing me. He's like, where are you now? Tell me your location now. This man showed up in like 5 minutes, handled business. And every time he's like, look, anyone look at you or talk to you, you call me. And I'm like, okay. He's like, listen, look at me in my eyes. I'm serious. Like, and I'm like, okay, cool. And the funny thing is like, Dima English is just not giving. And his Ukrainian, So I don't know how we communicated. But I have no idea how we communicated. And then he'll be like, hey, come to my office, you know, and his wife was awesome. His children was awesome. He will be like, come to my office so we can eat together. Like, it's lunchtime. Like, you got to leave. Stop being like this. That's American. Like, come over here and let's eat. And then he'll be like, look, I went to the store. I looked, read it. There was no molokotam. Like, there was no milk here because he knows, like, chill with the milk. I'm gonna be in the toilet. Chill. Like, yeah, I read it. Like, look, the pizza.
No
like,
milk.
no milk. I'm
I
like,
love
okay,
it.
I got it. Like, you know, so it's like things like that. Or my
Shout
friend
out to Dima.
who's coming to America soon. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. So it's like Oleg, like being like, you know, like she said not to touch her, like, you know, going off. Like, I'm like, yes, Oleg, get them together. You know what I mean? Like, Oksana, they're just my grandmas. Like, it's such a, man, Ukrainians have just so much love to give. And the people that I love are just so wonderful. Like, the nicest people I ever met in my whole life.
Yeah.
Even, you know, the sad things. I don't want to minimize that. So when I think of like, what's a nation, the stories I'm telling you, that's the nation.
Yeah. No, that makes, yeah, I don't think there's not a one line definition. I mean, a shared trauma also helps that, like a pride of a people, even like when we were reading the books and learning about just how different parts of Ukraine were, that some parts spoke Ukrainian, some parts spoke Russia, but like there's still some general tie that ties them all together, even though they all have their differences in different regions. And there's still that, like, you know, well, you know, you're a nationalist, a Ukrainian nationalist, Brie, but just kidding.
I swear, I would. I'm always Ukrainian every chance I got. I was like, yeah, Slava, let's do it. You know, what are you doing? Chill out. But I was constantly like, Slava Ukrainian. Constantly.
I feel like you've answered this, or we've kind of answered it, like what makes Ukraine unique, and obviously just so much of what they've gone through.
One thing I would say is language. Ukrainian, to me, is a very beautiful language. I could be very biased.
I mean, they're known for their poetry, so I don't think you're wrong.
Ukrainian, beautiful. You hear me? I'm like, yes. Like, I was talking to one of my grandmas recently, and I like cried because of what she said, and I also cried for like the way it sounded. Like, you know, she was telling me that she was very sad for me. I'm like, you literally in war and y'all worried about what's going on in the USA and me freaking out. Like, come on, let's choose priorities. But that's also Ukrainians, to really care about people outside of themselves. So she was just like, you know, ya sumnu tebe, which I think is like, it was just very beautiful the way she said it. Or ya lubiu tebe, like, or taboyu. Like, it's just the way things are said, like, I love you, love with you, whatever. The way things are said is just so beautiful to me, except, sorry for any Ukrainians in the chat, the word to use needs to be worked on. I can't stand it. We can go to the shop later and talk about maybe a shorter version, but why I'm saying it, the way that spinach is written out in cursive, that feels like an attack, but I'll let y'all know later. But it's just very beautiful. The food is unique. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Did you like it? Like, overall, the cuisine?
Okay, honestly, do I like? Okay, borscht. There's zeleny and chervony borscht, which is red and green borscht. Love it. Mess it up. There's a thing called I think called kutia. Love that. I've been trying to make that for a lot of friends. Kutia is like I think I'm saying it right. I could be wrong, but in my mind, kutia is it is oatmeal, like dried fruits, poppy seeds. You make it literally on Christmas. It's so good, fresh, it's bomb. Especially in the regions that make it, with water instead of milk, you know who you are. So with water, I'm here for that. They have Ukrainian shashlik, which is literally grilled meats. Top notch. Shout out to you, Dima, for keeping that meat ready. You understand? But there is, I think it's called shuba, is the name of a salad that I just can't get behind. It is levels of things. So it is mayonnaise and cheese and herring and pickled onions. It's not for me. Not saying that it can't be for somebody else, but I was like, in the way they saw me trying it and laughing at my pain.
Those are some ingredients.
That sounds like something someone in the Midwest came up with. So like I'm both terrified by it, but also I see how it happened.
Yeah,
No.
and you know, Ukrainians, they love a salad. Like if you go to a restaurant and the menu is this thick, I'm telling you, 3/4 of it is a salad. 100 salads. You hear me? You gonna get what you need. I prefer the Ukrainsky salad. Very simple. It's delicious. I'm gonna eat that. There's this thing called holodets. I hope I'm saying that correctly. It's gonna be a no. I can't do it. It's just like jelly meat. And I said no, but I've seen a lot of people eat it, but like the horseradish beet thing. Okay, I'm gonna tell you that is actually good.
Oh yeah, no, it is.
On meat, beets and horseradish. Oh, I'm tearing that up for sure. But Jess is like, no.
Well, Jess likes her chicken nuggets, and I think we've gone off that path.
I love this for people. If they love it, I love it for them.
To be honest, when I first had it, it was me and my previous supervisor, Larissa. I was like, Larissa, you know, I don't like beets only with borscht. And then she was like, no, you got to try this. I was like, okay, all right. And then she was like, look, I was like, hey, I don't eat fat on the meat. Like, can I? She was like, I don't either. I was like, cool. So we both can be disrespectful. Love that. So we're sitting there eating the meat, and she put a little line of that beet and horseradish. And I said, this is the end. But it was delicious. Oh, yeah. Every time. I was like, and it's called hrin. But I always pronounce it wrong because it's very similar to the word cloud in Ukraine. So I haven't figured out how to say those correctly as individuals. But
oh man,
I will tell you, it is good. Also,
are there any desserts? I love dessert.
Oh, let me tell you, Tatiana, who I worked with. Shout out to you, Tatiana, for real. Because the cakes, the torts that you made was next level.
Tell me about it.
I really wish I came here with pictures for my birthday consistently, or even like Thanksgiving, they were celebrating with me. I said, "Yo, we gotta celebrate this." But whatever. Ukraine has over 250 holidays. I don't know if anyone is aware of that, but I am letting you know that right now.
250.
So, there's a lot of celebrations, and there's a lot of celebration that came from Soviet times that continues. So like more contemporary thoughts are like, why are we keeping this? And like the people older is like tradition, you know, so it's like that clash.
Also because of like Orthodox Christianity has more days than
come on.
Yeah.
Come on, and that part too. So like in Ukraine, and speaking of that, in Ukraine, my friends would laugh at me because I would say, you guys got a lot of birthdays. And they're like, Bree, that's not what it is. Because you have a birthday of your saint, right? We celebrate that. That gotta be celebrated. Then in Ukraine, there's like 7 names for, I'm saying 7, being grossly oversimplified, but it is more. But there are a certain amount of names for women, and there are a certain amount of names for men. And I've never seen that been like a Ukrainian have a different name, unless there was somebody in somebody's life that wasn't Ukrainian and they were like, I'm going to name my kid this. But usually it's the same, like Dima, Oksana. So like Dima has a shorter name. So let me give you an example. So for Oksana, Oksana, her second name is like Suosha. And then there's whatever her last name is, that saint is like a day she's allowed to celebrate. Then there's also her actual birthday. Then there's also Oksana Day. So all the Oksanas in Ukraine be like, let's link up. Let's do it. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'd be like, yes, let's celebrate Tatiana, Larissa, let's get it. You know what I mean? Sophia, I'm gonna celebrate with you. So then I was like, look, we need Stevena birthday for me. I'm like, show me up. But yeah, so it's like those different things. I don't know where I went with that long tangent, so I'm gonna let it go.
That is amazing. I want a day of Jessica and a day of.
But we have enough Jessicas in the United States. You could probably get it to happen.
Seriously,
because like we don't have 7 names, but there are like 7 male names and 7 female names that are used very often in the United States. Like
seriously, so basic, especially in the late 80s and 90s. Jennifer, Jessica. It was like
Rachel's, Sarah's,
Matthew, Chris, you know,
the entire New Testament, yes, has been used way too often. Like
too much. I will add one more uniqueness. So in America, when you sneeze, we say God bless you, which I'm like, man, that's so rude to people who are not, you know. In Ukraine, you say bustarovia, which means be healthy.
Oh, I like that.
And I'm like, yes.
I think it's similar in a lot of countries. I don't know why we're so different, because I feel like salud is a thing that people say a lot when people sneeze, but also just means like health.
Health, yeah. Because we're a theocracy.
Truly.
I feel like I had a question and I cannot remember. Do you have any other from Bree? Anything else that you would like people outside of Ukraine to know about Ukraine? I don't know, just generally, besides all the wonderful things you've already shared.
Yeah.
Are the steps really pretty? I still don't really have a good idea of what steps look like, but are they really pretty?
I had to Google it. I'm like, what are they talking about? The steps?
Depends on what city you're in. To me, the most beautiful city I ever went to was Lviv. It's in western Ukraine. It's the oblast, the left of Rivnenska Oblast. It is very beautiful. The opera house there was amazing. I saw every opera you probably can think of for like $2. So really, I came on to come up, which could never.
Oh, I have another not important but important Ukrainian question. What is their alcohol beverage of choice?
Hrilka, vodka.
Oh, okay.
Or pivo, which is beer. So the thing is, it's really your poison. Or you go to a village, some grandma done whooped you up some wine and you're fucked up. You know what I mean? Some grandma whipping it up. And a lot of people don't like it because they're
you got some jungle juice?
Yeah. People like, it's sweet. I'm like, Davayate mini.
With vodka, do they drink like just vodka? Do they drink anything with it? Or...
It's usually not a mixed drink unless you're going to a more like modern place. So like, for example, this is something that I wish we did in America, and it makes me so sad every time I go to work and it's not present. I'd be pissed off. So in Ukraine, it is also a collectivist culture. We know that. And going there initially, I was like, I'm tired of doing all this shit together, Grandpa. And Ukrainians were like, well, too damn bad. You keep sitting, you know? So like, it was a whole situation. So one thing that I think that should be here, and like one of those things that I think people should know, is that in Ukraine, typically it is disrespectful for you to eat lunch by yourself. You eat with the group. Like if it's 7 of y'all, somebody's bringing the meat. Somebody's bringing the vegetables. Somebody's bringing the hrin. That's what I was talking about earlier. The sauces. Somebody's bringing a bottle of wine. Somebody's bringing the vodka. Somebody's bringing the beer. you choose which one. They don't mix. They have a lot of things about mixing things. So if you start off with vodka, you end with vodka. You start off with wine, you end with wine. And there's usually one person who pour for the whole group. And you cut up and you make everything all nice and all beautiful. And then you have like a little saucer. Like this is the biggest goddamn plate I ever seen in my entire life. Versus in Ukraine, the plate you get in front of you is about this fucking big. And I know it feels like, oh, that's really tall, that's really small, but you eating. The table is full. It's longer than 3 pots. Like it's huge. You
Everybody just brought something, and everybody
every day is a potluck. That sounds pretty awesome.
You would never starve, so don't worry about starving. Okay, so
I
you
love
just
that.
at work. Everybody got bringing the foods, and then somebody Slava Boha, and then it's like 12 like cheers. They're all for like women's health, men's health, children, God, country. They go in order. Every time somebody brings it up, somebody filled yours, you're ready. You think you're going to get drunk. Lies. You don't, because you are eating the entire damn time. And and then you chill 2 hours, and then it's back to work. And you just working. You're not drunk, you're not all across, you know what I mean? There's food there. And this happened in a lot of organizations. I'm not saying every organization in Ukraine works like this, but a lot of them do. A lot of them do.
You're like, you're not going to be the office recluse. You coming to eat.
No, I didn't. Listen, there's been times I was annoyed, especially in the beginning. Like my supervisor, Larissa Petrovna, she'd be, Yanushka, I would look at her. Larissa Petrovna, meni treba bilshe chasu. Like, I need more time. She's like, ni, yiste, like, it's eat time. I don't give a shit.
Down.
Like, what you're doing, you're going to stop and you're going to eat. That's it. And then at first, I was like, I'm tired of her forcing me to eat. I swear to God, it's going down. And then I'll be like, yiste? Right now? Okay. Go ahead and... At first I was like, okay, but at first, man, I mean, after a while I was okay with it. So like, that is like one thing that I loved. It's like you ate together when it was time to get like your vegetables and do different things. Like, you did it together. I love the opportunities that people let me go like mushroom hunting with them. And like, technically Peace Corps said, you're not supposed to eat. Peace Corps volunteers were not supposed to eat fish and mushrooms because they could be poisonous or be in a lake that's not good. I don't think I had too much trust. I had trust in the Ukrainians that I loved. They were not going to poison me. Chill out. Mm-hmm. They're not going to poison me. And there was this thing that they would prepare for winter that would have mushrooms, cabbage, and carrots. It was seasoned really well. I swear, I would go into the cellar, pop that lid off. Man,
was it like fermented too? Like,
it wasn't fermented. It was just good. I just messed it up. Or when they did like the tomato sauce mix, I was drinking it like it was a beverage. It was
a V8.
So good. I was like, yeah, that's me. My host mom would laugh at me. I'm like, you already know who I am.
Make extra.
We're gonna have to stop talking about food. I haven't like had lunch and it's almost dinner. Like, I mean,
yeah.
I'm gonna eat my spaghetti. Oh man, now I'm just like, I mean, I've already been sad, but it just makes me extra sad knowing what's going on and just hearing all, your positive experiences and memories. And
it is sad,
Yeah,
because like it's always the people that Bree was talking about that like get messed up. Like, it's just all these governments just want the resources of the nation, and it's like, but the people on the ground, the people forming these communities, they're the ones who have to pay.
Yep. Kind, caring, just like these in like Red Famine. It's just, these greedy bums at the top taking from people. Are there any other books that you would like recommend to learn more about Ukraine, whether that's, during, I feel like I want to read more about definitely like during, I know this was during that too, but more under the Soviet Union, because that whole USSR thing is always, I feel like that's one of the small things they teach you in America about, like Ukraine, Russia. They bring up like the Iron Curtain.
I mean, they barely even bring up Ukraine. They just they show all the countries on the map, and then they draw an
They
Iron
mainly
Curtain.
talk about Russia.
They're like,
but I don't know if you have any other like nonfiction, or it could be fiction if they're like by a Ukrainian author or something. If you would recommend,
I would say read anything by Shevchenko that you can find. Anything. Read anything that you find about Lenin and Ukraine, and you would definitely get a wealth of information. I'm blanking on my friend who's like a really good fictional author in Ukraine.
Can you spell is Shevchenko
Shaveven? I don't know how to spell Shevchenko.
I'm like, who's the? I just typed something in, and I don't know if this is right.
It's Ivan Shevchenko.
Ivan.
I think it's Ivan Shevchenko. Let me see if I can. Let me make sure I ain't giving you the wrong thing. when it's specifically to like Soviet Union, these are the things I've said and the things that I know is from Taras. Sorry. Oop. I want everybody to be Yvonne, huh?
I'll be like, Bree, I tried to find that, and I don't think that's who you meant.
I want everybody to be. But when you're talking about the dictionary, I think he had a prominent role in that. But when you're talking about Ukraine and the Soviet Union, I just got stories from people, so I don't have a book specifically to. Yeah, Taras Shevchenko.
Who is your favorite Ukrainian poet?
Yeah, Taras.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, and then some of my students wrote really well. My previous students had just beautiful writing. If there's anything you want to follow, I would suggest follow Kyiv Independence on Twitter. And know that it's Kyiv and not Kiev, and people will really get upset with you, Ukrainians would, if you say Kiev, just so y'all know. Because Kiev is the Russian pronunciation of Kyiv. So a lot of times when you're looking online, just make sure that you are specifying the Ukrainian pronunciation. Like, for example, where I lived was Rivne, but Rovna in Russian. Lviv, the city I told you that is so beautiful, is Lvov in Russian. So just making sure that you are respecting Ukrainians and their sovereignty.
I've been saying Kiev all the.
Well, I mean, part of that is I think our audiobooks were using the Russian pronunciation too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, they were saying. What were they saying?
I mean, I think until you just said Kyiv, I've always heard Kiev.
Oh yeah, Kiev is Russian.
On Twitter, what was the account? I'm sorry, you said Heed.
Oh, it was Kyiv Independence.
Kyiv Independence. Okay,
let me make sure I'm telling you the right thing too. I don't want to be spreading bad news.
We have learned so much today. I just feel like, I mean, yes,
these
are great primers that brought me here today. But then the Bree. Okay. Oh, that's spelled different than
You're probably using the Russian spelling.
Yeah,
I hate this for me.
Kiev, right? That's the Russian spelling. I'm telling you, it takes time. It takes time. These full newscasters say stuff, and I just be like, "What the hell?" So, Allie, yeah, you're right. What you spelled is the Ukrainian way of spelling.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anytime you hear a G, also is an indicator that what you're hearing is not Ukrainian. Okay. If you hear any sound that gives that G, it's not Ukrainian.
Nice. But see, aren't you happy now, Jess? I know these were hard books, but now you've learned so much and you had context.
I know. I'm so glad you could join. I really wow. I'm just dang, my whole life is a lie. Not whole life is a lie, but it's just like things that you wouldn't, things we just don't learn. And obviously the world is big. We can't learn everything, but
Yeah.
I just feel like we should have known something. Like I feel like I can't tell you, obviously that was a long time ago, but I cannot tell you that I ever in all my world history, whatever history, European history courses through high school and college, if I ever learned really anything about Ukraine.
Well, and like
Yeah.
I think we should learn in general broadly about the world we live in
Yes.
because we are citizens of the world. But also, I think there should be special rules for if we spend X amount of dollars out of my taxes on a country, you should teach me about that country. Like
I will agree. Yeah. Another thing is I'm trying to think of like ways to be more cognizant of Ukrainians. So when you meet a Ukrainian who is older than you, you need to say their full name.
Okay.
Do not say their first name. It can be disrespectful. Like unless they give you like say, call me Ivan or Larissa, Sophia, whatever. But like, it's like people older than me, like I would say Larissa Petrievna. I wouldn't say, hey Larissa, like what's up? Like,
Yeah. So if I ever met, I wouldn't be like, what's up, Dima? My dog.
Yeah. You would say Dima's full name. But Dima's is of our age group, so
Okay.
he wouldn't care. But
just
like,
when they're
Dima's
older?
mom, yeah, like Dima's mom, you might want to.
And they don't go. You don't call people like, I don't know, like when you meet people's parents in the United States, like in high school, you just like avoid saying their name, or you only reference them as X's mom or X's dad.
Stacey's mom.
Yeah, you can also like a lot of times, like especially host moms or like grandmas, I would just say babusia, and they can get away with that, just babusia. Or you say tato, which is father, or mama, which is mom. Like it's you can get away with that. So a lot of my friends' parents, I was like, I don't even have the energy to kind of remember because some of them had 30 letters of that last name. And like I said, going back to my previous point, Ukraine, I got beef with the language of to use, like it's too long. So like, and my students would be like, you could just say yuzu, and I was like, what? That makes sense. They're like, just cut it, because like to use in Ukraine, let me see if I can pronounce it. Vikorostuvuvate.
No.
Why?
No.
Vikorostuvuvate.
Huh?
I'm struggling. So when I say ya vikorostuvuyu. You. Forgot to add that other you. So like I am on this boat of confusion. So I'm probably just gonna say yeah, usually.
That is the other context in which I know Ukraine. I think they've had some winners.
Eurovision is big in Ukraine. Huge.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
So that is amazing. Well, if anyone watching the replay, if you have any, facts, information you want to add, or any books you recommend for anyone to learn more about the Ukraine, please let us know. And wow, this conversation, I was so anxious, and it's just been so wonderful.
You were anxious for braiding sweetgrass too, and Bree brought you through. You just need to always have Bree when you're anxious.
It went dark. Hold on.
I thought you headed out, but it was the light.
I know. It's like this is how Jess ends the live today.
That would be so disrespectful.
Not if. I hate saying if because I feel like it tells somebody that they shouldn't have been offended. The words I use, if you read them as offensive or they were offensive, definitely let me know. I don't want to be out here saying things that is really offensive. And like for me, I also want to say that sometimes it's really hard. That's why I was like, I don't know if I would come on today. It's because sometimes it's really hard for me to talk about my experiences in Ukraine in a positive light because most of them were dark and really sad. Mm-hmm. So I have to like pull it back and make sure I'm not putting those experiences over a whole group of people. You know what I mean? So.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you could. And I know that struggle with, trying to balance the positive, but it does sound like you had some really amazing people over there, and I hope that they're all well. And it's so exciting that you get to have a friend who's coming to the States.
Listen, the way I'm gonna fly out fast. I'm like, let me know ticket. I'm out. I'm out immediately. You're gonna have to spend every break with me. He's like, Bree. I'm like, oh, like,
can you get him on a video and you guys just like talk Ukrainian to each other? And I just want to hear it.
Yeah, I every time I used to be with him, he would be like, Brianochka, and I would be like, Yatut, like I'm here.
I just love how that sounds.
And then he would be like, Koroleva, and I'd be like, Yatut, like Queen. He would say Queen, which is Koroleva, and I would be like, I'm here. It was just so cool.
Yes, go ahead. I request a video, please and thank you. I don't care what y'all talk about. Just talk. Just talk and make sure he throws your name in there like 15 times a minimum.
Listen,
And I'm just
every time, I just feel like ever since someone first called me Brianochka, I said that's my name from here on out. Like I don't care about nothing else. I'm Brianochka.
That's it.
That's it. I don't care. So
that's on Mary and all of her gosh damn lambs.
Okay? She got a lot of lambs going on.
She
really does. She's doing work.
She does. Oh my gosh, this has been so great. Thanks to everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time. Check out the Discord, and we'll be talking. We'll figure out a shorter book to read in September. I promise it'll only be one.
You should do a bell hooks about love. Short, simple, love.
Look at that.
Not saying I'm forcing that on y'all, but it is short. It's bell hooks, of course.
I hear that's Bree's official nomination, so we'll have to put it in the pot.
Bam. Write it down. Okay. I mean, we'll still have y'all vote, but I'm definitely going to put that in there. Okay. Bye, everyone.